Okay, so Caliper Analytics. A lot of people are starting to get much more interested in Caliper. I think when we first started having conversations around Caliper, it was more about what is it? And I think now people are starting to ask the next question, and that is, how do I actually use Caliper? How do I get access to that data? What do I do with it? And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what it is, and then I wanted to share a couple examples of some really innovative things that a few clients in the US have done around Caliper, just to give you an idea of how people are actually thinking about solving the problem of capturing all of this data and where do I put it and how do I get to it and that kind of thing. So Caliper Analytics itself is essentially a standard way of capturing telemetry data. It's a IMS global standard. It is can be tied to LTI, and so it is a very useful and fairly new standard that we now have access to in the education space. And really, it is all about capturing usage data. And we'll go through a little bit of the use cases that we capture at Blackboard Learn. The way the standard is built, you can actually extend it and expand it, and as long as you follow a certain set of rules. And so what you get from Blackboard might not be exactly the same as you get from another vendor, but it's all built in a way that you can take the data from either place and use it without having to make substantial code changes on your end. So a couple of ideas that we had just sort of having a brainstorm about what you might actually use this data for. You can see answering those seeking more accountability about how the system's being used. You can really track a student's progress through a Blackboard Learn course with this data. You can find out when they logged in, when they viewed the course page, when they clicked an LTI link, when they returned from that LTI link, when they accessed a particular item of content. You can see when they logged out. You can see if their session time's out. And you can sort of get a good sense of how the student is using your system and eventually use the data that you captured to identify at-risk students or particularly bad usage patterns that you may be able to identify folks in the future. For instance, you may find students who log in only the day of the test and never actually log in and do the homework. And actually my favorite thought, and I haven't thought through the full way that this would happen, but I feel like you could use this data to actually do personalized learning. And so figuring out how the student is using the system, which things they're spending the most time on, which may indicate weak patterns of knowledge that they've gained, the places that they could use reinforcement, and actually give them content based on that. I think there is a lot of potential in this area, and I think Caliper can be a piece of the puzzle that really helps to drive and inform that process. So the point behind the Caliper Framework, it's really, as I mentioned, to provide a standard way for an institution to gather data from across its various systems that are Caliper enabled in a standard way to get all of the information necessary in order to tell what that student is doing. In a perfect world, all of the portals and everything that the student accesses throughout the day, regardless of if it's Learn or if it's some other system, would be able to populate the same data into your event store, and then you'd be able to get the full picture, not just what they're doing in the LMS, but what do they do throughout the day on your campus. So this is a pretty little picture. The top is meant to show you essentially the process by which a Caliper event is created. And then the bottom half is meant to show you what the event store might do in order to take advantage of that data. So essentially we have a system that implements a Caliper sensor. A sensor is just a fancy word for a Caliper object. That Caliper sensor the idea of an entity, and so an entity would be a course or something along those lines. And then it has the idea of an event, and the event is really the encapsulating piece that we send out to you so that you have all the information you need. So within the event, you have the actor, so who's taking the action that we're reporting, the action that they're taking, so are they completing a test, are they logging into a system, and the object that they are acting upon, so that could be the course itself, that could be a particular assessment item, very granular data, all encapsulated in one event message. And then on top of it, you get some context. So you can tell, for instance, in the context of an assessment item, you can have the target which shows the actual item on an assessment that they're acting on. You can get generated information that can be as simple as a grade, or it can be information about what they're actually acting on. The federated session ID is just a way for you to track essentially that particular set of messages. And then you can also get learning context. So within the context of a Caliper event, you actually get information on the organization, which in our case will be Blackboard Learn. You can get information about the membership, so you can see what course it's in. If it is a course section, you actually get the parent course and the child course. And then the education application, again, Blackboard Learn. So the bottom here, these are all Caliper 1.0 metric profiles. So these are the kind of things that you can expect to receive at your event store. So a base event is essentially just the event that all the other events are based on. As you may have gathered from the title, you will never actually receive a base event, at least not from Blackboard. But the base event is sort of the foundation for all of them. We have the session event, we have the annotation event. These are all the basic Caliper profiles. In a moment, I'll go through the ones that Blackboard actually sends and the context in which they are sent, and actually the timing, because some of the things that we send are immediate, some of the things that we send are done in batch once a day, particularly around grades. The sensor API, essentially all of these languages you see here, there is an open source sensor that is created by IMS that you can download and use for your event store. And essentially what that does is it allows you to serialize and deserialize from this giant JSON package into specific objects that you can interact with throughout your code. And then once you've done this, you just push it into your event store. And the event store is just your data warehouse where you're storing these objects. So specifically about Caliper metric profiles, essentially that is the basis of Caliper. It's a grouping of particular types of data. And each profile has built-in extensibility. So you'll see when we look at some of the Blackboard events, we've actually added in our own extensions into it, which give you information that you wouldn't normally get. So you'll get things like the course ID or the user ID and that kind of thing. So that as you receive these, you don't have to then call back and find specific Blackboard Learn information. You'll have it right there in the event for you. And basically there's the three type of events that we just talked about: the entities, what is being acted on, the actions, what is actually happening, and the events. All the information based on that event on what is actually happening. So these are the metric profiles that we currently support, Caliper 1.0. These are the actual metric profiles, so not the ones that Blackboard supports. Specifically, these are the ones that Caliper 1.0 support in general. So we have the annotation profile, which is essentially notes from the instructor. We have the assessment profile and the assessment item profile. So the assessment would be the overall assessment or assignment. The assessment item would be the individual question or whatever makes sense for that particular assessment. The assignable profile is specific to assignments. We have the media profile, which Kaltura uses, and we actually accept media events from Caliper in Learn SAS. And so if the student clicks an LTI launch into Caliper, we log that they launched, and we log that they returned, but Kaltura actually sends us messages also that say what they're doing while they're in Kaltura. And so they can see when they started the video, when they stopped the video, how long they watched the video, that kind of thing. And so as Caliper starts to proliferate throughout the industry, the idea is that eventually we can have this kind of data for all of our partners. And so you'll be able to, again, get that full, rich picture of what the student's doing throughout the life cycle of their course. So we have the outcomes profile, that is grades. Reading profile, you can tell if somebody's reading an assignment or a document within Learn. And then the session profile, log in, log out, session timeouts, that sort of thing. So Caliper 1.1 is coming soon. I've left Caliper 1.0 here and put the Caliper 1.1 on the right side just to do a little bit of comparison. There's not actually a huge difference, particularly in what we've implemented in Learn. The things that I'd point out is the outcome profile becomes the grading profile, and that means the outcome event becomes the grading event. And so that's the main place that you might expect to see difference in your code if going from 1.0 to 1.1 is if you're expecting an outcome event, you're never going to receive it because we'll be sending grade events. There are a few new ones. See, the other thing that I would point out is the forum profile. This is new to Caliper 1.1. In Blackboard Learn's implementation, we actually created our own extension called the forum event. And so I don't suspect that we will use the 1.1 forum event that has been defined, at least not immediately. We'll still use the one that we created. But I would suspect that at some point we will make that transition. So important to keep in mind, our implementation of Caliper is handled by our Telemetry service, which is a centralized cloud-hosted service. And because of that, it doesn't necessarily follow the version of Blackboard that you're on. It's all handled by that service. So what that means is that at some point, there will be a cutover from 1.0 to 1.1 that we will make sure that we have plenty of upfront notice that it's going to happen. But before that happens, we'll run both side by side so that you can test your applications against both before making any kind of transition mandatory. So in the coming months, we should see more information about this. The 1.1 work is done. It's actually passed our internal code review process. So just a matter of deciding how we're going to push it out and roll it out, and how we're going to set up the dual services so that folks can determine which one they're actually going to use. So the main thing to be aware of, especially from a client perspective, is the event store. So this is where all of the data is stored. This could be a server on your campus. I'll show you a few examples in a moment of how people have used AWS infrastructure to sort of build out their own event store without having to actually host anything. Some of it's pretty innovative in the way that folks have thought about it and processed it through various services within AWS, but certainly in the end, it's just a giant server that hosts data, so you can host it wherever you want, completely up to the parameters set forth by your institution. And actually, one thing I'll point out, it can be simple or complex. The node tool provider that we talked about as part of the LTI talk actually has a sample Caliper event store. And basically, it's an endpoint that accepts the events and then a Mongo database table where it just dumps it. So it can be as simple as that. I'll show you some more complex examples here in a moment. So setting up Caliper, essentially, you will see that there is a telemetry building block. And if you go to the setting page for that, it's as simple as setting up an event store. It's just a few pieces of information that we need. We need the URL which you'd like us to send the data. There's an API key which is sent as part of the headers that helps you determine that it's coming from a trusted source. And then you can set the event batch size. So If you want every single event sent immediately, you can set this to 1. If you only want 1,000 at a time, you can set it to 1,000. I think 5,000 is the max. I think that's what that says. Yeah. And then you can obviously set it active or inactive. There is one caveat. I think I have a slide about it in a moment. But if you're self-hosted, there's a setting that you have to set up in your bbconfig properties file. Currently, the telemetry service only exists in the US East data center. And so there's a entry in the bbconfig properties where you have to set that so that the service knows where to look. And the way that you'll know that that isn't set is when you try to access this page, you will get a 404. So let's talk a little bit about the Blackboard Learn specific Caliper events. There is a good set of documents. I may be biased because I wrote it, but basically it's a top-level document that shows all of the different scenarios in which you can expect a Caliper event, and then each event type has its own page that goes through some of the key data points that you might receive and a little bit more information. I'm going to probably go through the top-level page just to give you an idea of what events we're actually going to send you. But if you want more information, you can always go to the standard space on the community site and read through that document at your leisure. So for session event, these are the three things that we send: log in, log out, and a session timeout. This is sent for all users, so it doesn't matter if they're a student or an instructor. And we send these immediately, so you'll know if you happen to be monitoring the incoming stream, you'll know when they log in, you'll know when they log out, you'll know when the session time's out. The view event. So we send a view event anytime the student clicks a content file link, or an external link, or an assignment link, or a discussion link. Oh no, never mind. I was going to say, I think we also send one for LTI, but then I remembered we have the LTI event. So this is an extension that we've created, and essentially when they click on an LTI link, we send you an event, and when they return from that LTI link, we send you an event. So for the assignable event, we essentially send you something when they start the assignment, or when they start a group assignment, and then when they submit either the assignment or the group assignment. This is only for students, obviously, and it's sent immediately. For the assessment event, we tell you when they start the test, we tell you when they submit it. Currently, for the assessment item event, we send the test question and submit the test question. But we need to test it to see what information exactly we send you for the test question. I can't recall if we send you like what they answered or any kind of feedback like that. But that might be in the document that I posted on this developer space. And so this is the forum event that we created. Again, this is an extension, so that this is different than what you might get if we were to implement the Caliper 1.1 forum event. But you can see this is a pretty good list of things that we document whenever a student's interacting with a forum. And also the instructor specifically when they create a discussion thread, top message, that sort of thing. And so maybe the best one is the outcome event. Outcome event is any time a gradable action takes place. This slide needs to be updated. Anything that's associated with anything associated with grading, we send once a night. It's not configurable, it is hard-coded. We send it at your local time at like 12:30 to 1 a.m., somewhere like that. Obviously, there can be a ton of events associated with grading, and so the decision was made to set it so that it's sent in an off-peak time when hopefully not a whole lot of users are on the system, just so that you can process this enormous amount of data at once. And again, you can see there's quite a few reasons that we would send you an outcome event. Overriding a grade, posting a manual grade, updating feedback. You can really get a good picture of what's happening throughout the gradebook lifecycle for the student. The calculated grade snapshot event, which is loading, maybe. Essentially, anytime a grade is recalculated, this event is created. These are also sent at that same time as the outcome events. So this one is the content event, and there's a lot to this. If you look on the content event specific page on the community site, it's a nice little matrix that's much easier to read than going through this entire slide. We basically have it broken down into the type of event, and then it's if you create, whether or not we send an event, and then it's if you update, and we show specific fields. So if you update the availability of a content item, we send a message kind of thing. And then if it's deleted, there's a yes or no that says whether or not we actually send the event. Again, much easier to read than this, so I would highly recommend that you take a look at that. But there's a lot of different things that can happen throughout the life of a content item that generates an event. So you can see this one probably gives you a much better picture of what the instructor is doing in the course, how they're adding content and deleting content, and when they update things and that sort of thing. Here's the second page of content event. As I mentioned, lots of stuff. This also includes things around the discussion forums, content file uploads, that sort of thing. And a third page of content events. So we also have the course group event. This is another Blackboard built extension. So you can see when they create or delete a group. You can see when they update specific things around a group. So an assignment or a discussion forum or a test. And so we also have the blog event, another Blackboard created event. So basically when a student posts a blog entry or going along nicely with that, they post to a wiki. We have the wiki event. So you can see there's a ton of information that you can glean from these events on what the student or the instructor or anybody is doing throughout Blackboard. Just a matter of capturing it and figuring out which pieces of data make the most sense for you to report on, to generate reports or action lists or whatever it is that you're interested in using this data for. And so this is a direct link to the Caliper event guide. If you click that link, you'll see a document that looks very much like the last few slides. It's definitely most helpful for a high-level view, and then clicking on the links to drill down into more specific information about each event type. And I'm not a sales guy, but I know many people have asked me about Caliper and not wanting to do the work to implement it. We do have a consulting service. It is a Tomcat web app written in Java. It can actually be installed as a V2. And essentially, it's a lot of work that our consulting team did around implementing Caliper that you can purchase. If you need more information about that, you can contact your account rep. I think the biggest one for me on this list is the event filtering. So one of the things with Caliper is it's sort of a fire hose, and so we just fire all these events at you. With this, you can actually specify which ones you want to capture, and it will filter out the rest of them for you. Again, not a sales guy, so I'm not trying to take any of your money or anything like that, but if it's something that you're looking for, it is available.
So, in regards to that fire hose, would we have to set up some sort of queuing system to handle more than you could write, or is that done by the Telemetry service, or how does that work?
So that is all things that the institution would be building.
Okay.
And That's the last slide. I'm actually going to switch over to a couple of diagrams from Arizona State University and also the Idaho Digital Learning Academy. We've actually done a lot of work to implement this without having to host any servers on campus. Yes?
What performance hit does capturing events have? Obviously, the more events that you might capture, the more chance of cause some performance.
So do you mean in the context of Learn or?
Oh, sorry, you mean Learn.
So really none. The telemetry service is outside of Learn, so all that processing is done outside of the context of your Learn system. Really, I have not heard anybody mention any problem. I've not seen any support tickets about my Learn system is running too slow because the Caliper events are being pushed out to the telemetry service. We actually don't use Caliper to talk from Blackboard to telemetry. It's only something that the telemetry service actually sends out to you. So a lot of the data that's coming out of Learn is much smaller than what you would expect to receive from Caliper. So, like I said, I've not seen any reports of anybody having any issues with this data coming out of their Learn system. Okay, so this is Arizona State University. This is the architecture diagram that they came up with. If you Google Caliper ASU, I think that's all you need to Google, Caliper and ASU, and you can actually get to this blog. If you read through it, it explains a lot about what they're doing. Essentially, what we see here is the event stream goes through their wide area firewall into CloudFront. And what they're doing with CloudFront is essentially taking the incoming data from Caliper and putting it in a format that works through the simple network interface that Amazon uses. So basically they're able to do that, and by doing that the API gateway is able to accept it. And so they use the API gateway as throttling to essentially avoid pushing too much data into their external infrastructure. From there it goes into Lambda, where they run several functions. Number one, they're monitoring everything through CloudWatch, but it also puts it into a format that they wanted. So basically it transforms the Caliper event into the JSON package that they actually want, strips out any extra information that they don't care about, and then pushes it through Kinesis Firehose. What Firehose does is twofold. One thing's not on here. They have a Redshift database, and so Firehose pushes SQL copy out to the Redshift database to store the data in the tables that they want, and then it also pushes the JSON into S3 so that they can have the raw JSON also stored. The whole process, at least from the time that they contacted me and said they were interested in this, took them about 2 months. And a lot of that was because they were the first people that were doing this, and so they were trying things that turned out not to work for whatever various reason. But it didn't take them, terribly much extra work to figure out, okay, I'm getting to this point and it's not quite working, what do I need to add? So these were the first people to actually, that I'm aware of, to actually do this work. And they are actually using this in production now. I talk to them once every couple of weeks just to check on things, see how it's going, and they seem to be very happy with the process that they put in place and the infrastructure that they're using. And so all of this lives in Amazon. None of this is hosted on their servers on campus, and they seem to be really pleased with how it's turned out.
This is probably on the blog, but do they go into what they use to then report on that, like if they're using Athena or pushing it into an outstack?
I don't think it's in the blog post, and I haven't asked that question of them. The next diagram I'll show you talks a little bit about Idaho Digital Learning Academy, and they do include some of the reporting tools that they use. So Idaho Digital Learning Academy is another interesting group. They are actually also using Pentane. and they use it throughout other services on campus, not so they can actually get the LRS data, which Learn doesn't actually send it this time. So they're actually combining Caliper and XAPI into one event store, one learning repository. So basically they have their API gateway, and that's where all of these JSON packages are being sent. They also have some in-browser applications that they run on campus that is actually feeding this through Kinesis. And so basically it all ends up into this giant bucket, all of it in the format that they want, all of it segmented how they want. And then they have a nightly process which pushes it through AWS Glue. And then they also, it's a K-12 provider, and so they host a lot of sites for different schools throughout their state. And so they actually have an actor database that sits aside from this. So when they get the actor information in the various event types that they're getting, they can actually map it to a real person through this database. And so all this is done through AWS Glue, which then pushes it out into institution-specific buckets. And I think what you're most interested in, Patrick, is this piece. So this is some of the tools that they use once they have these buckets. They had talked about using Parquet formatting so that they could easily push it into databases. What they decided to do was leave it in JSON format in the buckets and then do the big hit of processing the data afterwards. So for that, they're using Athena, they use Power BI, Amazon QuickSight, all the various tools that you see that they use to then process the data into whatever format they want and to run reports against it and actually take actionable steps. And this is a private file, so I can't share it with you, but I am talking with them currently. As of Friday, they are very interested in creating a blog that we can share on the community site to go step by step through their process, and then thoroughly document the different steps, what they did, why they did it, why it was important, what they were thinking, that sort of thing. So hopefully within the next month or so, we'll start to see some of those artifacts being posted. So if you're interested in following this diagram or using it as an example to build your own, you'll have that information at your disposal.
Boom.
Only 6 minutes over.
You are superior.
So any questions?
So you indicated that telemetry service is external. It's sort of a little bit different what I understand is indicated that it's actually sent from learners these days. I'm not too sure if it's in our region or not with a telemetry building block. Is it different configurations or is external?
No, it's definitely external.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, it's a service that runs currently only in US East. I don't have any insight into whether or not they plan to push it out to multiple regions. I hope that we do, but
Okay.
but yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question, but was that about the telemetry service?
Yeah, some information I've received was basically on the third party. It didn't require the third party involved. It would actually do it from the local instance itself. The Caliper and telemetry building blocks. But yeah, that's not the case.
So you said just a little bit goes out to the telemetry service and then it wraps it up and sends it on. It doesn't store any user data other than passing through, is that right?
I know the telemetry service is also what powers a lot of the reporting that we do internally in Learn. So there is data stored there as well. For instance, if you are on SAS, we have student usage reports on assessments and assignments and something else that is not in my brain at the moment. But basically that's where those student usage reports are populated from. That's where the data comes from.
Just thinking of the old GDP
So actually, I kind of glossed over it because, but yeah, it is GDPR okayed based on secure transfer of data or something along those lines. Some fancy legal term that basically means the EU was okay with us storing it in US East.
I think that it would be, you know, as we move into our open discussion area, right? We can definitely continue to talk about this, but I think one aspect of telemetry, et cetera, is what type of data would you be interested in seeing, right? That may be outside of the current scope of what we're making available via Caliper, et cetera, right? I know, for example, that we, at least cursorily, yeah, I'll go with that, keep track of user interface activity, which the design team then, it's an anonymous activity at this point, right? But then the design team can focus on, oh, well, this is the hot area on the page where users are clicking, that sort of thing, right? Which helps them helps drive an understanding of, you know, what aspects of the user interface design are most successful, et cetera, right?
Checking that checkbox that says usage stats back to the.
Yeah, yeah. If everybody checks that, oh, well, hey, maybe that's an indication that that should be a default setting, right? Yeah. No, I was just, I mean, not that specific thing, but, you know, yeah.
Based on that, I think, at least here, a lot of the requests that I get is, they say, can I have some data? And I say, sure, what do you want? And they go, can you just give me everything, please?
That's the data lake, isn't it? Approach, the tool.
What are you going to do with it? Do you want to understand it? Just give me all the data. It's a lot of the requests that I get.
Well, and I think that's one of the principles, if you will, behind the whole Caliper approach is, hey, here's everything, just pick and choose off from, you know, what's being thrown at you, what you actually need, right? But to actually, you know, prioritize, that's a nice word, right? To actually prioritize development effort, right? It makes sense to actually have an understanding of what you're interested in. I know everything, but can't prioritize everything.
Tell me the question that you're trying to answer, and I'll help you get the data to answer that question.
Exactly, exactly.
So just give you data that you have to make sure that understand it. Otherwise that makes horrible assumptions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems we've had is around pre-filing web service logs to people, and they use time between clicks to calculate time in a course.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had many heated discussions about people saying that that's
How do you
not
accurately,
necessarily what that means.
exactly, how do you accurately measure, you know, time in a course? It's like, hey, you know what, I can load that page and then go get a pizza and, you know, have dinner and then come back and go, boop, yep, I've been in there all that time, go away, come back, boop, right? And so definitely there is a, I think that it's that consistent level of interaction, right? Okay, so someone loaded up the page, oh, it had a document on it, right? Well, yeah, they're reading the document and maybe 15, 20 minutes pass by and, oh wait, they clicked something, right? They're still in that page, right? But it's setting that anticipated, expected range. And I think that's one of the interesting aspects about the application of other, what's the right way? I'm going to just call it metrics gathering, right? So to be able to like filter a document through a, Ryan has these tools. You analyze a document to give you an idea of how long it should take to read it, for example, right? That's a 15-minute document. That's a 30-minute document. And then that kind of sets an expectation, right? It sets a window, right? And if it takes 3 hours, you know that person's like gone to get dinner, right? And so that particular time in course value becomes like a, a throwaway value, an edge case that it would ignore, right?
There are tools that can give you that kind of information.
Hemingway app is the one you're thinking of.
Yeah.
It's really a writer's tool, but it can give you some interesting information about a document.
Like grade level, like, what, what's the reading level of the document, right? The time it should take you to read the document, et cetera. Yeah, Amazon has some interesting, if you've ever used a Kindle app or Kindle, it has this nice little metric down there saying how much time you should expect to be reading this chapter, I think it is. They think they break it down by chapters. Yeah. You're old school, you still read books.
I have a bookshelf with that.
I got tired of lugging them around. So, but yeah, there's I think, we're looking at some interesting possibilities in the future, right, regarding how we can apply things like these tools that can provide information around the skill levels, et cetera, for documents that can further improve the metrics that we gather. And I think also as we look beyond the scope, right, of those simple base metrics and start to apply across multiple courses, et cetera, machine learning capabilities that can enable us to actually really get at some real world, very interesting comparisons, right? I tend to shy away from using terms like artificial intelligence, right? Because that opens up a whole discussion that can be had. So I like talking about it in the context of a machine learning perspective, right? Where you're really just statistically analyzing things and not really necessarily driving some artificial intelligence that will potentially change the behavior, but actually really get at a controlled statistical analysis across a large data set. And I think machine learning is really a great tool for doing that. That was me just rambling for a few minutes, sorry. Yes, sir.
With Caliper taking all this data in, do you see the activity accumulator processes being deprecated and removed out, or at least the ability of switching one off with the other switched on?
So I know we both have like our own interpretation of where this is going.
Yeah.
I think that and I'll let you voice your opposing or agreeing viewpoint. I think that from the world as we know it, okay, in the context of logging this level of data, like what's being currently pushed into the activity accumulator, is going to shift and change, and it's no longer going to be the activity accumulator as we now know it. Right, because as we look at the improvements that can be made and that we're planning on making, and that because as we continue to move forward with SaaS and improving that technologically, right, logging and collecting this data is one of those areas that we're looking at, right, and to be able to have it be more centrally aggregated, okay, and be more comprehensive, okay, than activity accumulator, I think is my take on the current goals, right? But it's an ongoing process that is in a little past the discussion point and more into the development point, but it's definitely a change coming. And Scott, I'll let you contrast and oppose.
So, not necessarily oppose or contrast. I don't have any information about the activity accumulator and what's going to happen with it or whatever. But I do see the telemetry service is capturing a lot of the same data. And I don't know, I feel like the activity accumulator is a lot of maintenance that happens on the Learn server. So personally, I would love to see the same data available without having to fill up the Learn database. Just my personal opinion. And as long as the data is accessible, I think that's the real goal. So.
There's no reason why it shouldn't, but just to check, does it catch mobile app interactions as well? I mean, I'm thinking it does, but because the accumulated activity, accumulated know what it does.
Yes, so I am 90% sure that as long as you tap the supported document types that we send Caliper events for in the app, it doesn't care if it's the app or it's a browser. If I'm wrong about that, I'll send everybody an email.
I'm so sorry.
Any other questions, Caliper, or anything else that we've talked about so far?
Just something that I was confused about from the last teaching online conference. The REST APIs, do you have to have a registered application to use them, or can anybody with a Learn account?
Sure. Straightforward answer to that is because the access to the APIs are based on Learn, essentially the equivalent of Learn session information, right? When you're logged into Learn, Learn knows who you are, knows what your privileges are in a specific course even, right? And so you can actually leverage APIs and test APIs in the browser, but you will only see the information that's pertinent to the role that you're currently logged in as, right? You don't see information that isn't otherwise visible to you in the user interface.
So works out for the same missions.
Yeah, and so there are some folks, and actually on the roadmap, and it's part of this 2.0 conversation, is we have a handful of folks who actually are interested in and actively developing, what would be the right way of saying it? I want to say in-browser applications, right? That basically run in the context of the browser completely. They don't actually go off and get fired off separately. There are some issues with that, notably depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it, you can run into permissions problems. And I have the acronym in my head, but I'm not dissecting it. The CORS problem with cross-site, what is it?
Cross-origin requests.
Thank you, because of the key and secret problem, right? Because sometimes you want to actually enable a level of activity beyond what the person's existing role is, okay? And you run into a problem there. Because you don't want to put that key and secret locally in the browser, because then it's readable. Dang. And so solving that problem is on our list, because I think that that's a valuable construct for enabling integrations, right?
Isn't that where the three-legged auth comes in?
Well,
or am I wrong?
So three-legged auth is also subject to CORS issues.
Yeah. Because it's the application key and secret, right? You still need an application key and secret even with three-legged auth.
I was more coming at it from the other angle, is can I turn that off to stop the IT students from potentially passing us?
And unfortunately, because Learn itself is using REST APIs, you can't, right? So now one of the things that again, forward-looking statement, blah-de-blah, is that understanding the desire to basically say, no, I don't want to expose APIs at all, or maybe I don't want to expose this grouping of APIs or APIs to this user role at all, right? Then to be able to go in as an admin and have some checkboxes. I'd love to have it only be like 10, right? But odds are it'll be like 80. Checkboxes for disabling API access is something that I've talked with the team about. The problem is that that is unfortunately in direct conflict, because one of the things that I want to do, okay, is I want our products to use the same APIs that you're using, right? Well, darn, if we are both using the public APIs and I've given you the option to say you can't use these public APIs, then we have a problem, right? I think there are workarounds to that, right? Like signatures that, and basically saying at an application level, this is what's possible. So all of Learn, do it this way, right? But if an API request comes elsewhere or is otherwise of a different signature, then you have to follow the settings. So I think that there are ways that have yet to be discussed for sorting through that. But my ultimate goal, right, is that all of our products use the same APIs that you're using, right? Because that means what we're delivering, you're getting the same value. They've been not only tested, but they're actually in use in a pressure-tested capacity that you would not normally be able to do, right? And I think it increases the assuredness, if you will, that it's a solid API, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, and for us, because our only Blackboard product is Learn, the simple, like I said, anybody in the country, anybody who's not Blackboard server can use these, that's fine. But in a SaaS environment, like if you use Collaborate or something like that, then that would be my
Yep. And the value, there's additional value for us using the same APIs, because the public APIs fall under a different life cycle from a versioning perspective as well as and a support perspective than the private APIs that are often used, or the internal APIs that aren't exposed to y'all. And by having our products, whether it's a mobile app or an attendance service or anything, follow those same public API development life cycles, there's value to that because you understand what's going on. Oh, hey, wait, our developers also understand what's going on when we say, all right, we've deprecated this, okay, here's the new version. By X date, you definitely have to be, internally, you definitely have to be using the new version. Y'all can wait a little bit if you need to, right? But the point is that there's a solid, published, and I want to say constrained life cycle, right? That isn't just cowboy land. Oh, we're going to change that, and some guy gets a good idea and changes something that has a trickle-down effect that causes problems elsewhere, right? The idea is let's stop doing that. Yes?
You need to have some way of differentiating between them though, otherwise you need to sort out rate limiting, don't you?
Between what?
Well, if you're going to use the public APIs within that or whatever externally, the rate limiting stuff is going to come into play.
Rate limit's based on the developer group, and so we saw when
So you just give yourself
would just be unlimited.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's why it was built in as an option.
And is that the same for like if I'm a student and I'm just using the APIs with my account, that doesn't contribute, I don't have a group?
No, it does, via the browser?
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't impact your rate limit at all, right? Because it's not going through it's not going, it's going around that side, sorry?
That's just using a session cookie or whatever, it's not going through the portal.
Yeah.
Things are going to be hitting those APIs all the time, aren't they?
Not for us with the problem, but they work.
Yeah.
Paul's been very patient in the back there.
No, I was just going to say on this, because I did a lot of my own learning about how the REST APIs worked by bashing them in the browser. And you can do, as by design, anything that your role can do, you can see that way. It might be because I'm incompetent, but I could not get any data to change that way. It's purely a view only thing.
Yeah.
Post, put, patch, no chance at all.
Only gets. So how many folks here have actually done anything with the REST APIs? Oh, quite a few. That's awesome. I would love to hear what you think about where they're at currently, right? Have you identified things that you, oh gosh, I really wish that the APIs did this, right? Aside from batch requests, we know y'all want that, right? Any gaps in the APIs that you're using? Yes.
It's not what I would find, just passing on some messages from my team member. And one of the things that we seem to struggle is the user IDs, and the RESTful API doesn't seem to return that piece of information, which is quite important for some applications or use.
Mm-hmm. Which does not return?
User ID.
Sorry.
Can RESTful API search for fields other than user ID? So.
Yeah. So that's actually a good, we'll be talking about that tomorrow morning, right? But just a bit of a spoiler alert, in improving the search and filter tools on the current APIs is collectively a roadmap item, but one of the points that I often make when I talk about these types of things, these are enhancements to existing APIs and features on or added features on existing APIs. And when I'm faced with, oh, well, here's a nice to have with a feature, right? Versus, oh man, we don't even have an API for this yet. I often will lean toward this as being the priority, but this gets filtered in, right? And so, for example, on the near-term roadmap is a search improvement for searching on modified dates, for example, for records, content, courses, users, etc. Okay, so adding additional fields is definitely a roadmap item, but it gets kind of put in with everything else, right?
I totally understand, but sometimes if that functionality is not complete, it's kind of hard to use.
Oh yeah, completely understand. And I wasn't saying that we're not doing that, right? I'm actually agreeing with you in that it's something that we have prioritized into the roadmap going forward. The other bit that, and I'll repeat this tomorrow, the other thing that we're doing is adding, right now you can only have one field that you actually are able to search on at a time, and we're going to look into increasing that to within the limits, of course, right? But we're going to actually look into being able to have multiple search fields so that you can essentially do joins on searches, right?
On that note around, really nice to have things, date ranges for all dates, modified, created, all those kinds of things, regexes on things like usernames.
Yep.
I understand the complexities of doing stuff like that.
Yep.
But essentially, a lot of times what I run into problems is, here's what I would do in SQL. How do I get that subset? I can't get them all, and then I have to filter through them really fast and be able to narrow that subset down.
Yep, I hear you.
Most often that's, regex or
Right. And actually being able to do, right now, I think on users, it's all contains, right? And so on my search work for this is to actually not have them be all contains, but to be able to use some wildcards and to be able to say begins with, ends with.
does not contain.
Yeah. But I'll be honest, it'll probably be an incremental addition because it's the kind of work that, yes, it's prioritized, but it ends up kind of being as the team can work on it, right? And so, yes.
Either an endpoint or a parameter
course creation for course templates would be really fantastic. I don't know if there's anything, as far as I'm aware, there isn't any progress to do that at the moment.
For course, what?
Templates.
Yes.
Yeah, is that the right terminology?
Yeah. So you can specify a template when you create a course.
Through REST, you can?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, that must be reasonably.
It's part of the create course request. If you want to jump to the docs there. One of the things, I know we're and so how about this? We'll do a little roadmap-y stuff, and that gives you opportunity to ponder it this evening, and then tomorrow during the presentation you can either remind me that I wanted to talk about it and I'd missed it, or B, ask some questions about the roadmap thing. So one of the roadmap bodies of work is to actually have an endpoint for course copy, right? We don't actually have a course copy right now. We have that copy into, which is what the templating is, okay? But we don't actually have, I have Art History 101, fall 2017, and I wish to copy it to fall 2018, optionally retain bodies of content, etc., in the copy, like get rid of the memberships, but keep the discussion threads and keep the main content, right? And copy that into a new course, okay? So that's on the roadmap, okay? Yep. Oh.
So you can currently specify which pieces of content you want to keep, or you?
No, when you do a template, it's an entire copy into. Okay.
You will be able to at some point?
We will have a course copy endpoint, right? And because it's not designed yet, right? There's a bit of abstraction to this conversation, okay? But the idea is that the course copy endpoint would allow you in the request to specify what you wanted copied, right? Like maybe you want everything, including the instructor, but not the students, for example, right?
So in the old sense of templates, where you used to go in and actually go and set a flag that said a course was a template, is that something that's only going to be used for sort of feed file stuff going forward, or will that be used with REST?
So I think that direct specifying of
Is that what you're looking for?
No. That's interesting. An exact copy into a new course. Yeah, so you can do that, but you don't specify. I completely forgot we had that. So yeah, surprise. So we do have the course copy. You just can't optionally select the content. It does a 100% copy of the course.
Enrollments, or it's just the content?
It includes everything. Okay, which is, only moderately useful, right? Because then you have to basically do a second set of REST calls, get the memberships and remove all the memberships except maybe the instructor, right? And so that's the problem with this particular endpoint as it exists today. The work that I'm talking about on the roadmap is to add the options to this.
And that's into a new course as well, as opposed to copying content.
Yeah, it copies it into a new course.
Yeah, so it would be useful to have an endpoint like the current course copy where you can copy into an existing course as well.
Okay, yeah. But back to the templating problem, that's actually, which I thought was what you were asking about.
Is that a post-course thing?
Uh,
I didn't see it in there.
Yeah, post, not copy. Get post V2 courses maybe.
How long do we have V2 courses?
Yeah. May not be listed, maybe it may only be listed in the model. So basically, completely understand that there are some gaps, right? And that there is improvement to be made not only to the existing APIs, but also to support some additional use cases around course copying, right?
The use case that I'm referring to is at the end of every year when we do our subject release for the following year, we create all of the subjects as blank shells, but some of them for specific colleges, we use a template to build so that when they're constructed as new courses, they have, you know, a banner and set items in navigation for original, and for ultra it may be something like they've got a couple of content items in them, that sort of thing. So we would like to be able to do that in a more simple way. We can sort of write code to get around the issue of we're going to do a copy from an existing vanilla site into a new site sort of thing, but I just wondered if there was going to be something more direct.
Yeah, I believe that that we actually have the ability when you create a course to specify, it's not called template though, that's the problem, and I can't remember what it's called, Scott. I will look this up tonight, but I am 99% certain that there actually is the equivalent of the template, so that when you create a new course and you specify the template course, that course's contents gets copied into the new course, okay? And then there is the course copy scenario where you're not using necessarily a template, specified template, but you're actually using another course, right? And I think that one of the interesting things is regarding templates. I think that my recollection, perhaps incorrect at this point, since it's been quite a few years since I adminned a Learn system. My recollection is that a templated course really is, for all extensive purposes, the same as a regular course. It's just that you can't necessarily populate it the way and work with it the way that you would a normal course, right? And it may turn out, when we look at it from an ultra perspective as well as an original experience perspective, that we won't actually have the concept of a template in the old school original sense, because it's no longer a requirement, right? And so being able to actually specify what you want copied and how you want it copied to a new course or to an existing course will be, I think, the fulcrum point, right? Honestly, one of the things that I really try to do and argue for in the context of the REST APIs is let's make it simpler, right? And if instead of overloading a bunch of terms that essentially mean the same thing, oh, it's a template, oh, it's a course, oh, it's an organization, right? Let's actually just make it all simpler. And so if a template is indeed what I think it is, which is just another course, let's actually just copy it and you call it what you want. And I think that's what we did with the, did you find it, Scott? No? Well, I would definitely look, because I'm fairly certain it's in there.
I know we added it somewhere.
I know, yeah. But anyway, so definitely, I'd love to talk with you more about the use case, just to make sure, but I think we're on the same page. Sure.
What about, things for search and replace, like forever having the university restructure itself and the roles change. So doing things like finding a string within content items and replacing in the REST API as a generic thing. I possibly even go further and replace the content item.
Yeah. So I think that from a content item perspective, that's certainly. We have the APIs now that support accessing, downloading, and replacing content, essentially, right? You can do that. I think getting to that string level is where things get complicated, right? And I'd have to punt on that, because honestly, I look at that, I see the value in it, right? But at this point, I pretty much guarantee that I just don't know how I would fit that into the current roadmap, right? At least in a short-term capacity.
I would think, based on the search tools you were talking about before, it contains things like that. You could potentially use those sort of things that are coming to find the content items that contain the string you care about. Then do within your set of the code you're writing, replacing the content and post it back up in the apps.
But what I was hearing was a straightforward search and replace endpoint, and that is, you hit it spot on, right?
The other end of doing what you're suggesting, loading up every item in the database, checking it, string checking it, replacing it.
Well, I was saying once Mark's future search tools come in that was discussed 10 minutes ago, then you might be able to find through the REST APIs the ones you care about and then replace them.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to, like you say, you don't have to get every single one of them and then do the search yourself.
So like you could basically search on, these are active courses, that's what I really care about at this point, are the active courses, and this is the field that I'm interested in, which you find the courses, right?
And if the content item contains this string, which is what we're talking about, and you found the ones you can that has the string you want to replace, and then you can replace it.
One waiting on my desk for me back there at work is I've got to replace the string that's in 24,000 objects. Now that's just one fan so far.
It's only 24,000 post requests.
Take a little
You do it for now, surely.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more function for a RESTful API?
Sure.
File permissions. Is there anything implemented to handle that?
File
the original
permissions?
question was how can we target the file permissions using RESTful API?
So that sounds like a content system.
That is a content system question. So, excuse me. There really are two file stores in the Learn environment, right? There's the course file level file store, and then there's the content system, right? That is a completely separate ball of wax right now, the content system itself, that is currently undergoing some rather serious optimization work, and which means, sorry?
The things itself?
The content system itself, right, okay, the code behind that. And I don't want to write APIs against a moving target like that. And so, and I don't have an ETA on when that work is going to be done. I'd be thrilled to share it with you if I did, but I don't. But it's only when that work is done that I'll be comfortable with working on content system APIs. Right? But if you shoot me an email, right, I have a record of your question, and when I do have an idea...
in your mailbox.
Alrighty. I like that. Okay. You're welcome.
One that's got 5,400 unread emails.
That's an improvement.
There we go.
So not to be the squasher of conversation, but it's 5:02.
Oh no.
I don't know how long the bus is waiting for us, but we should start to pack up.
We should.
Tomorrow morning we have the roadmap and then we have more discussion, so save your questions for